endurance racing here or in Europe, Porsche seems to be the label we refer to most.
They're the name. They are brilliant engineers in a very relatively small company in Stuttgart, Germany. Zuffenhausen, actually, a little suburb of Stuttgart. They are the veterans there, and the cars are very expensive race cars, but in the long run they're not, because they're so...
Front row we have some professional drivers such as Danny and Gaius and Bob Wallach, but back in the pack there are doctors and lawyers and dentists and mechanics. You name the occupation, it's represented here.
And there's our man Joe Vardy, who's teamed with Lee Mueller in an RX-7 in this event. But there are, as you say, Steve, all kinds of different occupations represented here, but also some very strong professional drivers mixed throughout. Elliot Forbes Robinson is a Grand National Stock Car driver, a former Can-Am driver of some prominence, and so they run the gamut, really. Amateurs, semi-pros, and full-time professionals.
And also, Brock, we're looking at quite a variance in speed. You consider the 200-mile-an-hour Porsches, and back in the pack there's some 150-mile-an-hour automobiles, so traffic is going to be a problem early.
It'll be a problem all the way through the race, Steve, as the faster cars have to weave through the slower cars, especially on the infield portion, which gets pretty narrow when it gets nice and crowded.
Well, right now everybody is settling down behind the pace car, and we'll be back for the start of the IMSA Grand Finale in Daytona Beach, Florida, right after this.
And we're back at the Daytona International Speedway for the start of the IMSA Grand Finale, as the cars come down the back straightaway behind the pace car, warming up their tires, weaving back and forth. And Steve, there's more than one race here this afternoon.
Well, of course, everybody wants the checkered flag in any car race, Brock, but we also have the GT Series title, which John Paul Jr. is pretty well wrapped up. Nobody's going to take that away from him. You see a huge lead point-wise over Ted Field and his own father. But there is also the GT Endurance title at stake here in the IMSA Grand Finale, and that is by no means wrapped up.
And both the Pauls are in that one as well. John Paul Jr. leading just by a few points over his father, and M.L. Spear and Terry Walters, who are teamed up in the same March car here at Daytona this afternoon, are also in the race. Then we have the Porsche Cup we talked about earlier. That is strictly an event that is going to go down to the wire between John Paul Jr. and Bob Wallach. Ralph Stommelin's not racing here this afternoon, and Fitzpatrick is too far back.
And John Paul Jr. is on top of all of those point standings. We're here at Daytona looking for a start of the IMSA Grand Finale. The pace car is pulling down into the pit area as they come off the banking coming out of the NASCAR Turn 4. And we have a start, and John Paul Jr. leads it. What a start he got, Brock.
It looks like he may have gotten on the gas a little bit earlier. It's hard to say, Steve, but I got an idea that they may want to have a little talk with him. He got way big jump on Bob Wallach as they head down into that dog leg and around down the back straightaway behind the pits. He's got himself a pretty good lead. But watch this. On the right-hand side of your screen, that black car of Danny Gaius sneaking up on the outside. He's going to try to put a move on John Paul Jr. as they come around that hairpin and head onto the back part of the road course. Look at this, Steve. Fishtailing as he comes off that corner, that zero turbocharged Chevy blasts right past that 935 Porsche. Bunch of power.
And Gaius, who prides himself, Brock, on quick starts, I think was quite amazed that John Paul was in front of him, but certainly has wasted no time in regaining the lead. And Gaius just pulling away now from the Porsche. But of course, we've got a long ways to go. The first lap doesn't mean much in this kind of racing.
No, it doesn't, but it's an interesting display of power, because those 935 Porsches, like John Paul is driving, develop around 700 horsepower as well. And it's just not done that you blow past one as fast as Danny Gaius just did. And look at the lead he's got now. He's got about 30 car lengths on him as they head out onto the banking. So that Lola has got a bunch of horsepower, so it's going to be a factor all day.
Well, the race to watch right now has got to be for second and third spot between John Paul Jr. and Bob Wallach and the Porsches. They are side by side. Well,
even at this point in the race, Steve, everybody is running as hard as they can, because they're going to test each other out, see who's got the real power. And at this point, Gaius with a big lead. There he is, over 200 miles an hour off that turn 4 banking, heading down toward ending the first lap. He's got the power, but now Wallach is in front of John Paul and got himself solidly in second place.
Well, Brock, I wondered about that quick start of John Paul Jr., and so does the International Motorsports Association, because there is a consultation flag out for John Paul Jr. They're going to force him to bring that Porsche into the pit area. He apparently foul started.
Well, that's going to cost him a lot of time, but this is a long race, and it won't mean that much, but if in fact that's what they're going to do. He may have some mechanical problems too that we don't see from this vantage point, but at this point John Paul Jr. is going to have to head for the pits as Danny Ongais in that number 0 turbocharged Lola T600 holds a nice solid lead over Bob Wallach in that 935 Porsche John Fitzpatrick's.
With John Paul Jr. being hailed into the pit area, that takes some of the pressure off of Danny Ongais right now in the early stages as far as winning this race. And also, Brock, some of the pressure off of Bob Wallach as far as the Porsche Cup standings are concerned.
Well, John Paul's had himself some bad luck early in the going, but he is one of the finest young drivers in American road racing. Headed for Indianapolis. Uh-oh, look at that, Steve. A spin as he headed off that simple little corner heading onto the banking. That's an unusual thing. I wonder if he was distracted by the idea that he was going to head for the pits with that black flag, got himself a little bit upset, maybe lost some of his concentration for a second, and of course that's going to put him back even farther.
He certainly wasted no time getting back into the race, did he? Danny Ongais right now is has a commanding lead here in the early going of this IMSA Grand Finale. Here again we see John Paul. Boy, he is making up for lost ground, isn't he?
There's 200 plus miles an hour with that little car. That's that 935 Porsche we talked about earlier. These cars dominate here at Daytona in this kind of racing. It's really kind of a surprise to see anything other than a Porsche leading the race. So as John Paul Jr. heads down pit lane to answer that black flag call, remember, I was just about to tell you that he's headed for Indianapolis as a rookie driver and may very well make a big mark at the Speedway and all kinds of racing. So there he is, pulling to a stop. The International Motorsports Association officials open the door, tell him that he was a bad boy, and he's going to have to sit there for a few seconds. Now back underway as Danny Ongais heads on. Really nobody anywhere near him now. Brake lights. These cars carry brake lights too, Steve, so that they're really, as I said earlier in the show, these are fully road-equipped automobiles, although you're not likely to see one of them in the parking lot of your local supermarket. As John Paul Jr. heads on, his foot buried in the firewall trying to make up time, and Steve Evans has gone to the pits to see if he can find out more about that black flag incident.
We're with Hurley Haywood, who is co-driving with John Paul Jr. Was it an IMSA official who brought John Paul in after that first lap?
It sure was. John jumped the start a little bit, but everybody tries to do that when you're up front, and he just got caught. So they brought him in and told him what he had done and sent him on his way out.
He's an eager 22-year-old, but a real talent.
That's right. He sure is. It's a pleasure to drive with him, and we got a little bad luck, and we're back in 12th now, but I'm sure that if the car's working right, we'll get right back up there.
Not anywhere near the kind of bad luck that Jim Truman's had with his March number 10 car. He bounced it off the wall in turn 4, slid down into the infield, tore the rear end off the car. He and co-driver Bobby Rahal are certainly out for the day. Fortunately, he wasn't hurt as Danny Ongais comes into the pit. Steve?
Brock, this is awfully early in the race to see Ongais, who was leading it, into the pit area. So there's something seriously wrong with this automobile, I would guess.
I'm just wondering whether or not he didn't run over some debris in that Truman crash. They're going to change the right front tire. He's got the engine running. You can see the flame still coming out of it. And other than to change that right front tire, I don't think they've got the hood up, which implies that the engine's okay. Going to clean his windshield up there, just like a normal service station stop, maybe put on a little fuel, but I don't think there's anything seriously the matter with the car at this point.
Well, you know, Brock, it's interesting to note how leisurely these pit stops are compared to what you would see here at the Daytona 500, for example, where a tenth of a second could mean the difference between winning or losing the race.
Well, there are a couple of reasons for that, Steve. First of all, the yellow flag is out because of the Jim Truman crash, so they're not in as big a hurry while the caution is on the track. Everybody's slowed down. And two, these cars are designed to make a driver change, usually in a pit stop in an endurance race, so they're not really set up to make fast tire changes. So as Danny Ongais gets back on the racetrack, we'll be back with more of the IMSA Grand Finale. We're back in Daytona Beach, Florida for more 200-mile-an-hour endurance racing. This is Steve Evans along with Brock Yates and Ed Bruce. Under the caution flag, it is Bob Wallach, the Frenchman, leading in car number 2, the Turbo Porsche.
followed by David Hobbs, Don Whittington, and Al Holbert. It's rare really to see a yellow flag, an overall caution flag in this kind of racing. Usually there'll be a caution flag only in the turns, but due to the danger, the speed here, the high bank oval, you will see the typical NASCAR-style caution flag. Brock Yates is with the cause of the caution.
Jim, a real strong run for a very short time. Did something break, or did you just lose it up there?
No, I didn't lose it. I think it's just we were running high, and there was debris, and the right rear tire blew, and we just slapped into the wall and just tore everything off the car. And I was lucky when I came down. I got it stopped before I got the inside, so we were running well. I thought the start was terrible. I was in 10th place by the time I got to the straightaway. I don't understand that, but maybe I shouldn't bother to say that.
Yeah, it was a little informal on the start, but
I picked up a few, and I felt we'd be all right, and but then this happened. So,
well, we're real sorry. We're glad you're okay. I'm sure you'll be back.
We'll be back.
We've talked about driver changes earlier. Well, here's the first of many. Preston Henn of Atlanta, Georgia, comes out of the turbo Porsche that he owns and installs professional driver Al Holbert. Preston Henn, who turned a bunch of drive-in swap meets into a multi-million-dollar fortune, really enjoys his endurance racing. In fact, has a daughter, Bonnie Henn, also out on the track somewhere. But right now is Al Holbert taking over the reins from Preston Henn.
That's a pretty common combination in this kind of racing, Steve. Preston Henn is a wealthy sportsman. He's driving with a full-time pro, Al Holbert. Jim
now enjoying his role as a spectator down in the pit area. This is the leader, the Frenchman, Bob Wallach, and Brock Yates had a chance earlier to ask Bob why he's here.
Bob, had you planned to come to this race, or had you hoped to win the Porsche Cup in Europe without having to come to a Daytona?
Yes, of course, we would have liked to win the Porsche Cup in Europe and not having to come to win it here. But it's always a pleasure for us to come and drive here because we like the country and we like the people and we like the way you organize races.
You've done very well here in the past, is it? And you, of course, have broke the lap record during qualifying. It must be a racetrack that you're rather comfortable on.
Yeah, I like this circuit, but I'm also driving a very good car, very well prepared by John Fitzpatrick Racing. It's a car who has been designed for long straights like Le Mans or like here, so it was quite easy being on pole.
Well, a nice compliment to American racing from the Frenchman, who is now leading in car number 2, the turbo Porsche, Bob Wallach. And here's about $500,000 worth of racing machinery, Brock, all owned by Ted Field.
A pair of Lolas, Ted in the 00 car, leading Danny Ongais in the turbocharged V6. As you say, a very expensive pair of automobiles, very carefully prepared. Ted has a marvelous racing operation out in Newport Beach, California that really puts together some good racing machinery. And look at this. That's Danny Ongais in that turbo V6. The 00 car has a normally aspirated V8 engine, 355 Chevy in it, and just doesn't have the beans that that turbo car has down that back straightaway.
And right now, Brock, we see one of the few instances where a driver enjoys being passed, as Ted Field watches Danny Ongais come by and take 7th place.
Well, certainly it's Field's role in this race to keep the 00 car in the event while he lets Danny operate as the sort of rabbit in the field. He's going to run that thing as hard as he can, make up the time he lost with that pit stop with a flat right front tire. So Ted Field's Interscope team is beginning to plot some strategy as this race unfolds. Steve's with one of the crew members now.
I'm in the Interscope pits with Steve Niulo of that team. And Steve, with all the time the pace car has been out on the track, how is that going to affect your fuel economy, and how do you think your economy will match up with the turbo Porsches?
Oh, I think it'll help us quite a bit. Plus, it gets the engines a little cooler, and we don't have to run as hard.
Now, this is the first time out for the turbo V6. What kind of economy is it going to get, again, compared to the Porsches?
I think you'd have to actually ask the crew chief, but I don't think we really know yet. This is the first time out for the car on any kind of a real performance run, I think. So we just have to wait and see.
All right, thank you, Steve.
Okay.
I don't think we're going to have to wait and see for long, because Danny Ongais is the fastest man on the racetrack at this particular point as he rushes up on Derek Bell in the 09 Porsche 935. He's going to try to squeeze past him as they go up onto the banking, and we're going to see a demonstration of the kind of power that this turbocharged V6 Chevrolet has as that thing gets gathered up, going up onto the banking, and there goes that demonstration of real 700 horsepower going past first Derek Bell, now closing in on Bob Tullius in the V12 Jaguars. They go down the long back straightaway. Gaius pushes right on past him and jumps up into 5th place, Steve.
Well, Brock, this is a pretty impressive debut for the Turbo V6, and this is an iron motor, the same kind of an engine you would find in a Chevrolet Monte Carlo, any Chevrolet product with the V6 power plant.
Pretty stock engine, actually. And ooh, Bob Tullius in the Jaguar is up against the wall, shedding sheet metal as he comes down the front straightaway.
And remember now that Tullius sits on the right-hand side of that car. He's a lot closer to the wall than, say, Richard Petty would be in a stock car, and now being chased, Brock, by his own right rear tire.
Well, he took a good hard shot. Fortunately, Steve, he was up near the wall when whatever broke or if the tire went flat or whatever caused that. So he didn't really spin and get it sideways. So he scrubbed down the wall and took an awful lot of speed off. Looks like he's okay. He's out of the car. But boy, that was a very hard hit at over 200 miles an hour. We'll be back with more of the grand finale from Daytona following this. We're back at the Daytona International Speedway. I'm Brock Yates with Ed Bruce and Steve Evans as the field, under caution, comes down the front straightaway with Bob Wallach and John Fitzpatrick in their Porsche 935 leading this event. The caution due to this. The number 44 Jaguar V12 GTP car. A bad crash coming off turn 4, Steve Evans. A very close call for driver Bob Tullius.
And Tullius, as many have in the past, finds out just how unforgiving the concrete wall here at Daytona really is. The formerly sleek cat is now being badly damaged up against the concrete barrier. And Tullius, who sits on the right-hand side of that car, is getting a look at every pore in that concrete. You saw the right front fender shred away. Now Tullius is steering into the wall, trying to stay out of traffic, but the cars behind him know where he's going. The biggest problem for traffic behind him now has got to be the tire that is chasing Tullius down into the grassy infield. This car is only a few races old, literally brand new, and today certainly has been its best ever showing. Tullius more than competitive until this encounter. A well-built race car, Bob Tullius is okay and is now with Brock Yates.
You all right?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, what happened? Did something break?
No, I think a tire went.
It's been a tough part of the course for a lot of guys all weekend, Bob. Was there something out there that's causing a problem or what?
Yeah, it's hard. It's always been a tough place on the course, it's Rockland. It's just always been a tough place. I think they need to build a little bit more into the tires maybe. But I don't know for sure. It started to hum a little bit like a universal joint does, you know, and then whack.
The car was running very strong. Are you pleased with it?
Yes, we were running very good. I was just about to pass on Gaius. Coming around the ball, I was really pleased with it.
Well, we're real sorry. Glad you're okay.
I will be back.
Well, Tullius won't be passing anybody for a while until that Group 44 car is repaired, and that's going to take some work. In the pit area is the Preston Hannone car driven by Al Holbert, apparently taking on some rear tires, and he rejoins the field, which is still under the caution flag caused by the Bob Tullius Jaguar crash. It's always nice to pit if you can under the yellow flag, but it's not that big a factor in this kind of endurance racing. Behind the pace car is our leader Bob Wallach in the Porsche, and his prime objective today is to win the Porsche Cup. Brock, talk to him about that.
Today, if your car stays together, no problems, and you hold the lead, will you make a driver change or will you go the entire distance?
No, to win the Porsche Cup, I have actually to pick up as much fun as I can. If I drive 2 cars, which we intend to do, I'm going to switch into the K4 in the second Fitzpatrick's car.
I see. So you can gain points, hopefully, with a 1-2 finish. That would be the ideal.
That's the ideal, yes, but I don't know if it's going to work.
Well, those of you with a home computer will have a real advantage in figuring all of this out. And it looks like, yes, we have a green flag. And it always occurs where the road course joins the oval here at Daytona. That's where the green replaces the yellow, not at the start-finish line as you might expect.
It's a much safer place to start the race because you got that big open expanse of the super speedway banking where everybody can get sorted out as they gain speed. And speaking of gaining speed, here comes Danny Gaius in that number 0 turbo car. And this is a rare sight, Steve, to see a Porsche 935 blown off as convincingly as he just went by John Paul Jr. in that blue and yellow car of his.
And that pass will put Danny Gaius in the Chevrolet Lola in the number 3 position, Brock.
And he's got the 2 leaders in sight. In front, Bob Wallach throwing up a little dust there in the number 2 John Fitzpatrick car, and immediately behind him David Hobbs in the number 22 Fitzpatrick car. Both blue and white Porsche 935 cars, long tail cars, Kramer modified cars, Steve. They're built in Germany by the Kramer brothers. They start out as Porsches, but they're heavily modified automobiles, and as Wallach said, his car has that long tail for aerodynamics at Le Mans and of course here at Daytona, where high speeds are so important and where you have to have that stability that long tail gives the automobile. So Wallach is right now got himself a fairly comfortable lead, but look at that black car just to the left of our screen. That's Angaias, and he's got the bit in his teeth.
Porsche certainly has one of the most sophisticated racing development programs in the world. Look at Angaias moving up now on the Porsches. I was about to say they have a dyno block in Germany where they can bolt a motor on and literally through computers run a race like this. Shift the gears, do everything, simulate an entire endurance event.
Well, they have their own big test track at Zuffenhausen where these cars are run, and they're an amazing company because their commitment to motor racing is as strong as any manufacturer in the world, probably only equaled by Ferrari, and everything they do is designed to make race cars. And boy, I'll tell you, there's a Chevrolet car that Danny Angaias has got right now that's really putting it on him, because that number 0 car is without question the fastest race car on the track at Daytona right now.
Angaias now in second position, hoping to gobble up this man, Bob Wallach, as he did his teammate David Hobbs. Angaias loves horsepower. In fact, he started in a sport that provides a driver more horsepower than any other, that being drag racing. He was a national champion in that sport until Ted Field came along and gave Angaias the chance to show his hand in not only this kind of racing, but Indianapolis as well. He's
a brilliant driver. Certainly, Bob Wallach's got him in his rearview mirror in full focus right now, because he's really got the bit in his teeth. I wonder, though, let's not forget, Bob Wallach broke the lap record here in qualifying for this race, Steve, so he's not going to be as easy a mark as some of the guys that Danny just passed. Wallach is a very experienced driver and has got a very good automobile, so Danny's going to have to work on him a little bit. He's just not going to suck him up like everybody else.
Well, Danny is not known for his patience, Brock. In fact, the spectators, the fans call him on the gas.
They sure do, and he has been known to make a mistake once in a while, especially in high-pressure situations, because he is such a competitive driver. He's, as you say, rather impatient, and this is the kind of a situation where he could get off the racetrack. He could make a little bit of a problem for himself trying to get past, rush past Wallach. There he kind of dive underneath him as they head up onto the banking on the back part of the racetrack, but he can't get by him. Now, there's a drag race, and this may be where that old Top Fuel experience will come into play.
Look at Danny Angaias. He takes the lead over Bob Wallach. It is now the V6 Chevrolet and the English-built Lola leading here at Daytona. And I guarantee you there's nothing but smiles in this man's pits over the debut of this turbocharged V6. We'll be back here at Daytona to see how it does the remainder of the afternoon.
The sound and the fury of the IMSA Grand Finale as Danny Angaias leads the way. And Ed Bruce is with the man who is the key component in organizing this event.
With me now is John Bishop. John is the man who started IMSA and has guided it to tremendous success in a short period of time. John, what made you decide to take the chance and start IMSA?
Well, Ed, I was between jobs. I had just finished about 12 and a half years with the Sports Car Club of America, and a number of new tracks were being built through the country, more than the sanctioning bodies could take care of. So we thought that would be a good time to get into the sanctioning business.
You've achieved a great deal of success with this organization in a relatively short period of time. How did you do it?
We had a good idea, number one, and we had some very good advice from our backers. Bill France here in Daytona was a marvelous friend, has been a marvelous friend and a helper, and we've also had a very good response from the contestants in various leagues of racing. We seem to have rules that appeal to them. They put on good shows. The promoters have come around, and the sponsors followed.
Were there ever any periods of nail biting when you wondered if it was going to be a success?
There was one time, I think it was in the winter of 1970-71, when our fortunes were kind of at a low ebb,
and B.F. Goodrich Company asked me to make a commercial for them, and I like to tell this story. It's almost true that those residuals helped us over that winter.
John, thanks very much for talking to us. We're going to go back to racing. Fellas?
Thanks, Ed. And here's the man that is doing the principal amount of racing here, Danny Angaias, the black Lola T600 with the revolutionary V6 turbocharged engine. The fastest man on the racetrack right now, Steve. And here, Mauricio de Narvaez in the Porsche 935 that he was teamed with John Paul Sr. is off the racetrack.
Apparently Mauricio, the South American driver, made contact with the wall and then got it down safely in the infield. One of the emergency crews standing by with a fire extinguisher. Now this is going to be bad news for John Paul Sr., who was scheduled within a lap or two to get in this car and try to earn some points for the endurance title.
Well, this man isn't in that kind of a race because he didn't run very many IMSA shows this year to get him involved in the endurance title, but he sure appears to be headed for victory here at Daytona in this last race of the season. But there's some smoke coming out of that thing, Steve. I don't know whether he's got some problems or not, because there goes Wallach past him into the lead in the number 2 Porsche. Danny's down low in the low lane. He's got some flame belching out of that car under acceleration, and that's not a normal behavior for it. So he's slowed down. He's got troubles. I expect he's going into the pits.
Well, one thing we've learned, Brock, in all of our race coverage is how totally unpredictable motorsports competition is. Just when you think everything's under control, something always seems to go wrong.
Isn't that the case? And here's old Danny down in the slow lane, but he still seems to be staying ahead of a lot of the smaller displacement cars. So even at half speed, that thing's quick.
Yeah, there's a lot of drivers out there that would trade straight up right now for what little horsepower and guys has got left.
That's right. I'm sure he's plenty unhappy. But this man, Bob Wallach, well in command right now. How quickly, as you say, things can change in a race. You just can't get a big enough lead to take nullify a mechanical failure. So Bob Wallach, new leader in that number 2 John Fitzgerald Moby Dick car. As Angaias comes into the pits, and look at that, Steve. There, that right rear tire is shredded. That could have been the problem.
Apparently it was the problem. Danny Angaias suffering tire problems, as so many drivers have here. But we should point out that it's not necessarily the tire's fault, because nowhere in endurance racing is the right rear tire loaded as hard as it is here at Daytona due to the banking.
Absolutely right, Steve, because the Grand National stock cars, that signal from the crew chief, that looking like cutting his throat means to Danny, shut the engine down. They're through for the day, I'm afraid. At least they're going to close operations here to try to get it repaired anyway.
Well, no one's told the guy washing the windshield that, have they? He just keeps on washing.
That's right. He takes his job seriously. You can tell by the look on Danny's face, he's not happy, and I think probably they're out. But gives all the more advantage to Bob Wallach, who was not really contested seriously by anybody other than Danny Angaias, who's now out. And now Steve is with Angaias to find out what happened.
Danny, you were really eating them up out there until what went wrong?
Well, we had a tire come apart and take the lines off of the oil cooler for the gearbox, and it's now full of oil inside of the engine compartment and being turbocharged, we're afraid. So what might happen if we decide to continue and get it hot and start a fire back there?
So you're throwing in the towel at this point, or you hope to get back in it?
We haven't really made that decision. The car is a ways back at the moment. There's really not a chance to win, so we'll have to see where our other car sits at the moment. Maybe we'll team up.
Well, for a first outing with the new Chevrolet V6, you got to be impressed with the power it makes.
We're enthused.
Thank you, Danny.
That's about as enthused as Danny Angaias gets. A very taciturn man. Takes things in his stride, but a brilliant race driver, and I'm sure he's uncomfortable on the sidelines as his marvelous number 0 Black Lola is pulled into the infield. So the race goes on with Frenchman Bob Wallach in command.
And will a race of endurance are under the caution flag right now here in Daytona Beach, Florida. Steve Evans with Brock Yates and Ed Bruce. It is Frenchman Bob Wallach currently leading under the yellow. The yellow was brought out because Danny Angaias, who was the leader, had some problems with this car, and the officials fear there may be some debris out on the racetrack. And here is our leader coming into the pit area.
I'm sure it's going to be for a driver change, routine stop, as Bob Wallach gets out of the car, and John Fitzpatrick, the owner of both the Hobbs and the and the number 2 car, 2 Kramer Porsches, gets ready to climb in. Fitzpatrick is probably one of the 4 or 5 finest endurance type drivers in the world, and currently living in Southern California, although he's an Englishman, but is based in California, has a very successful team, races both in the United States and in Europe. Not a big rush here, Steve. As you can see, the cars are still under caution, so nobody is really hurrying too fast, but they're going to make sure that the car is down off its hydraulic jacks. These cars carry their own jacking systems inside, so no problem about getting them off the ground to change wheels and tires. But as Bob Wallach takes off his helmet, Steve Evans is with one of the men responsible for all that speed and power in the Angaias Lola.
Everyone has been left very impressed with the performance of the twin-turboed V6 Chevrolet built by this man, Ryan Falconer of Salinas, California. You've got to be pleased too, really.
I'm very happy. We only intended to bring it here just to see what problems we were going to have. We had a fair share of small problems, but things started looking pretty good, and we thought we'd take a chance on it and start the race. And as we got into the race, things started getting better. And I really believe now, had we not had the tire problem, it would have gone the distance. But I'm tickled with what we've learned. We've learned a lot from this, more than you can on the dyno or in testing when you only run a few laps at a time. And I think that the people we ran against know how the car runs.
Boy, that has to be the understatement of the day, based on the way that Lola T600 with the engine by Ryan Falconer behaved all day. And now, back under green, down the outside of the back straightaway comes David Hobbs in the other John Fitzpatrick car. He's now taken the lead and has a solid advantage over his teammate John Fitzpatrick in his own automobile. So the 2 Porsches of John Fitzpatrick lead the way. And David Hobbs always brings his sense of humor with him to a racetrack. We ask him what it takes to be a great race driver.
Well, I suppose you have to have exceptional ability, of course, foresight, skill, obviously above average bravery and confidence in oneself. Apart from that, nothing really special, no.
And of course he left out modesty, but seriously, Hobbs is one of the all-time greats. He's run at Indianapolis, he's run at Grand National cars, he's run all kinds of racing cars and is all over the world and deported himself excellently in every phase of racing. And here he leads this young man, John Paul Jr., in one of the Paul family's Porsche 935s, coming down the back straight. He's about 3 seconds behind Hobbs at this point, but can never be counted out because, as we said earlier, one of the really fine young prospects in this sport and a very solid talent. So as John Jr. chases David Hobbs, Steve Evans has caught up with his co-driver.
Well, it looks like Hurley Haywood is going to be a man of leisure this afternoon, as John Paul Sr. is going to take over for John Paul Jr. Instead of you, as I understand it, Hurley.
Well, it's disappointing. I wanted to run with John because we had a good chance of winning, but John Sr. needs the points for the World Endurance Championship, and since our other car, the number 46 car, had a fire and went out of the race, I was the one that got my seat taken by the senior, so he's the boss. I can't complain.
So Hurley's philosophical about being sidelined, and of course he is the winningest driver in the history of the Daytona International Speedway. Won all kinds of 24-hour endurance races here.
David Hobbs, our leader, is bringing car number 22 into the pit area, Brock, and this is going to be for a driver change. Bob Wallach, who earlier relinquished the wheel of car number 2 to John Fitzpatrick, will now fill in for David Hobbs. It is Wallach who is contesting for the Porsche Cup Championship, which is a program designed by the Porsche factory to pay an awful lot of money to the most outstanding private entry in the world of endurance racing. So Wallach is going to get behind the wheel of that car and try to rack up some more Porsche Cup points. And I'm sure David Hobbs takes great pleasure in handing over the car that was leading the race at that point when he brought it into the pit area. But right now it is this man, John Paul Jr., who is leading this IMSA Grand Finale in car number 1, the young driver from Atlanta, Georgia. So Bob Wallach has got the belts tight, the clutch released, and heads out to chase down John Paul. This car is going to handle a good deal differently than the Porsche he was in earlier. It's a totally different breed of Porsche automobile. Brock Yates is down in the pits with David Hobbs.
How about old Angaias? He blew up, but he seemed to be running awful quick when he was running.
Yeah, we got the car that we won with at Mid-Ohio, and it just It's got too much downforce for here, and it's so slow down the straight. Al Holbert just went past me now like I was tied to the ground, and of course so does our other car, which Wallach and Fitz are driving. But, in the infield, the car's dynamite. It's very good, but that Chevrolet has got a lot of horsepower.
John Paul Sr. strapping on his helmet is a sure sign that soon John Paul Jr. will be coming in, so that Dad can take the steering wheel and try to earn some more endurance championship points here at Daytona. Wait a minute, John Paul Jr. has got some problems. Body panels falling off the car as he eases it down onto the grassy infield. He may well have made contact with a wall. So for John Paul Sr., it's going to be a long wait if he ever gets to take the controls of that car or any car. They came here to Daytona with 4 fine drivers, 2 magnificent Porsche automobiles, but the best of battle plans has gone awry. John Paul Jr., I don't think is looking forward to that father-son chat that is bound to happen when he gets back on it.
Because of the John Paul incident, John Fitzpatrick still leads, but look at that third-place car, Ted Field, moving up, and now Ed Bruce is with one of the great legends of this sport.
Standing with me now is a racing legend. This man is not only responsible for the existence of NASCAR, but this super racing facility, the Daytona International Speedway. Obviously a man of great vision, Mr. Bill France. Mr. France, there was a time when the races in Daytona were held on the beach. Did the community support your efforts to build the Speedway?
Yes, the city by 1936 had found out, Sir Malcolm Campbell set the last world speed record attempt here on the beach. He went 276 miles an hour. That was in 1935. But he had hoped to go 300, and the following year he moved to the Salt Flats. So the city put on the first beach road race that was won by Milt Marion in a 36 Ford. Yeah, that was in 36. Well, the city lost $22,000 on that race, so the following year the Elks Club put the race on. Just was gotten together by some of the local citizens. And then that was in 37. In 1938, a restaurant operator and I undertook to run the races. And I've been associated with them ever since.
When did you build the Speedway?
Well, we opened it in 25 years ago, this coming, well, just about now. This was 1959.
Mr. France, it's been a pleasure to meet you, sir, and I know I speak for myself and all racing fans. We say thanks for all you've done for motor racing.
Well, there's a lot of things that have been done for motor racing from up in Nashville, because Marty Robbins was one of the great guys, and Mel Tillis and all of the folks. We've got a wonderful relationship with the country western folks in Nashville. So someday we're going to have a big country western festival down here.
We're proud of you, sir. Thank you.
Right on.
And thank you, Ed. You know, there are people who will tell you that Bill France Sr. is the most powerful man in American automobile racing. And now Steve Evans is with the guy who caused this caution period.
Well, there's nothing that'll put a race driver in a bad mood any faster than leading the race and having something go wrong. What happened, John Paul Jr.?
Well, it sounded like the tire just blew. It started making a noise like the tire was separating. And I lifted it about that time it really blew, and I just turned hard left, and thank God it just slid right down into the infield. And well, by the time I got stopped, all the wheel and everything flailing around there, it pretty much tore up the suspension. Car's all right. We're just out of the race.
And the race is about to restart. After that caution period, the pace car pulls off, and as the field jumps out onto the banking, Fitzpatrick leads the way, but look at that. Ted Field in that black Lola moves past Hobbs in the second place car, and he's now riding in second place. That Lola was way back for most of the afternoon, but has steadily moved up and now is in a position to challenge for the lead. And John Fitzpatrick leads the way down the long back straightaway as Ted Field in the Lola gets him in his sights. And let's not forget that Field's co-driver is a man named Danny Angeist, who's going to be in that car, I'm sure, before the afternoon is out. Now, Chip Meade, 9th place, Pontiac Trans Am, highest placed American car. Interesting story around that automobile. Steve Evans has it.
Well, Sam Moses, who's a part-time race driver and full-time journalist and one of the best, including Sports Illustrated, has been waiting around here for the last hour and a half to relieve Chip Meade in this outstanding Pontiac, the highest placing American car right now, and suddenly something's happened, Sam. You're not going to drive.
No, it doesn't look that way.
John Paul Sr. is in a position to win the Endurance Championship. I'm not even sure which one. And he came over, and he can see that we're leading the GTO class, and he can score points by winning in this car. And he just basically bought the seat out from under me.
To gain those points. He lost his car with John Paul Jr. He lost his other car. He was finished without a ride.
Yeah, he made an agreement with Gordon Opdahl, who's the car owner. And so John Paul Sr. is going to get in the car, and I'm not.
So Sam's out, John Paul Sr.'s in. As Chip Meade climbs out of the Pontiac Trans Am, John Paul gets ready to climb in. They're different sizes, so Paul may have a little trouble seeing over the steering wheel in this particular automobile, but that doesn't seem to faze him a bit.
Well, these guys are pretty well acquainted, Brock, as they're both Atlanta-based teams. But still, Chip Meade did a double take when he realized that Sam Moses was not going to get into the car. I'm not sure right now if he knows who's getting in the car.
Well, I'm sure he recognizes John Paul Sr. at this point, but nonetheless, he's pointing out some of the switches and telling him some of the different instrument settings and whatever about that automobile, because it's a substantially different car than a Porsche 935 that John Paul Sr. has been used to driving. This is a heavier car, not quite as powerful, but one that John Paul Sr. hopes will carry him to the Endurance Championship.
But these are the guys that have command of this race at the moment. That is Bob Wallach in the number 2 car leading over Al Holbert, and back in third and challenging is Ted Field. The double were away. This man, Bob Wallach, in car number 22, came into the pit area. He came in as the leader, but we understand, in fact, he is getting out of the car, and that machine is done for the day. Whether Wallach is, remains to be seen. Now, wait a minute, here comes car number 2, John Fitzpatrick in. He is now the leader, or was the leader till he came in, and there's a good chance that Wallach will get in that automobile. Remember that he is still competing for a lot of money in the Porsche Cup competition. So it's musical, and here, the 00 car of Ted Field is in the pits. Field is out of the car, and Danny Ungaius is in.
So it's going to be a race to see who gets out of the pits, and I think Ungaius is going to win it. Yes, if he's on the racetrack, as usual, standing on the gas as he goes down pit lane, and he leaves John Fitzpatrick and Bob Wallach in the pit lane. So the new leader, Danny Ungaius, in the 00 car. Don't forget, that's a non-turbocharged V8 car, Steve.
Brock, while we were watching this driver change, car number 6, the Preston Hinn Porsche, came into the pits and is already back out on the racetrack. So he will be the second place car, and right now Bob Wallach in number 2 is number 3. And this should be all it takes, really, for Wallach to win that Porsche Cup with John Paul Jr. out of the race. Down in the pit area with John Fitzpatrick is Brock Yates.
You got past John Paul just before he hit the wall, is that right? Do you think something, a tire went down or anything happened, or he just overcooked it?
Well, I think he probably picked up something during that yellow flag period in the tire. I mean, you know, you drive around that last turn, and it's just tragic to see all those expensive cars just flattened against that wall. And our cars aren't built to run on the Speedway. You know, we should have a chicane before that corner. They're fragile cars. It's not like bouncing off the wall in the stock car. They're fragile cars, and they cost a lot of money, and there's a lot of wrecked machinery up there.
The car is behaving perfectly. Did you tell Bob anything before he got in?
There was nothing to tell him, to be honest. It's just perfect, so let's keep our fingers crossed. I was sorry to hear that David's car went out. I didn't know that till they just told me, but that's a shame.
The banking and the walls here at Daytona do tend to intimidate some of the Europeans. Danny Ungaius now leading in the Interscope 00 V8 powered Lola.
And here's the man that carried that car to its present high position, Ted Field, who started out, wasn't seen much during the early stages of the race. Started out as kind of an uncertain race driver, but has turned into a good, solid talent. He's a very private man, part of the very wealthy Marshall Field family of Chicago and California, and overall a very unique and interesting character in this sport.
Look at this race, Brock, for the number 2 position. That is Bob Wallach on the inside in car number 2, and on the outside, the red and white Porsche car number 6. Now, Preston Hinn owns that car, but I'm not sure really who's driving. I think it's Doc Bundy.
Well, whoever it is, he's put a few car lengths on Wallach as they came up onto the banking. That's a good fast 935, the number 6 car, Preston Hinn's, and should be able to hold his own against Wallach.
Well, the only thing Preston Hinn has more than Porsches are Porsche drivers.
Yeah, well, Preston is one of the good guys in this sport. Okay, the leader, Danny Ungaius, now in the car, along with co-driver Ted Field.
One of the best races of the moment has got to be this battle for second place. The red and white car, we believe, driven by Doc Bundy, being followed by Bob Wallach. Bundy was in competition earlier with co-driving with Bonnie Hinn. They went out with mechanical problems, so he was available to drive. And he's an awfully good professional race car driver and the chief instructor at Road Atlanta's driving school. And right now he's giving Bob Wallach a bit of a driving lesson.
Yeah, he's an awful good guy, too, Doc Bundy is. He's pretty much exclusively raced Porsches in most of his big-time career. And now staying in front of one of the best in the business, Bob Wallach, as they go around that 180-degree corner down into the infield. Uh-oh, Doc got a little wide there.
Yeah, he sure did, but it still amazes me, Brock, how fast these guys can adapt from one car to another. Now, it is Bob Wallach out ahead of car number 6.
Yep, that little bobble by Bundy was enough to get Wallach past him, so Doc's got some time to make up as Bob Wallach moves into second place. Now we'll see what happens on that drag race as they go up on the banking and down the long back straight, because this is where just raw speed and horsepower is going to play the game.
And believe it or not, the drivers tell me that even at 200-plus miles an hour, that back straight gives them a chance to relax and kind of get the muscles loose and get ready for the tight, twisty infield to come. So Wallach on the left side of his screen, being followed by car number 6, we believe, Doc Bundy. So here is Wallach, who right now can relax a little bit mentally, knowing that he has clinched that Porsche Cup competition, and that's worth a lot of money from the German car manufacturer. You know, it's interesting. Earlier we heard Wallach, the Frenchman, tell us how much he enjoys racing in this country, and particularly at Daytona. But the man who owns his car, Englishman John Fitzpatrick, told us that he doesn't particularly care for this kind of a racetrack. He doesn't like the banks and the walls. Now, we think that car number 6 is driven by Doc Bundy. Brock Yates is down in the pits with the car owner to find out for sure.
Okay, we got Preston N here, the owner of car 6 and 9. We're doing a lot of musical chairs here for the last. I can't keep up. Who's in the cars? Preston, bring me up to date.
We just pick anybody we can and throw them in the car. We've got Derek Bell is back in 09. Doc Bundy just went in and relieved Al Hover. That's our last driver change, and that's final.
Okay, well, you got 2 cars running real strong now.
Both of them are running great, and they're going to go for it, so we'll see.
What'd you tell them just before they left?
Well, they knew to go for it. You don't have to tell them anything.
Nobody's having more fun than that man from Fort Lauderdale, Preston Hen. And going for it is Doc Bundy, officially now the driver in car number 6. And he has given Bob Wallach fits trying to take that second place from him, Brock.
Well, Doc Bundy is a very persistent and a very competitive race driver, but let's not forget Wallach is one of the most poised and cool endurance drivers in the world. So Doc's got his hands full because Wallach just isn't going to let him pass. There's a bobble first by Wallach, and now Bundy spins into that corner, backwards, stays off the wall, fortunately, but the front end has taken a lot of damage.
Well, Bundy has already got it back in low gear and is going to rejoin the fight, but he can't possibly know how much body damage has been done to this car. He really didn't hit anything, Brock, apparently just scraping on the grass.
Yeah, it was just grass. That's light fiberglass. That's kind of a cow catcher for the ground effects to keep the air clean underneath the car, and it just flat tore it away when he got onto the road, off the road. So, looked like he pressed the button and jettisoned the rest of the bodywork up front. So now he's nice and clean. Aerodynamics aren't so hot, but
it's a lot lighter than it was.
Oh boy, yeah, he certainly hasn't hurt the suspension, I wouldn't think, but these cars just don't like to run around without any bodywork on it because they're very, very carefully designed to be aerodynamic, so Doc's going to lose a lot of straightaway speed.
That's right, that front end was there for more than just appearance. It actually acts as an airfoil pushing down on the car, especially at high speed. So Bundy may have an evil handling Porsche on his hands right now. We'll find out for sure when we come back to Daytona and the IMSA Grand Finale.
As Doc Bundy loses it in the dogleg in the infield and heads for the weeds, Steve Evans.
And Brock, you get a feeling here for how fragile and low these cars are when freshly mowed grass can do this much body damage. It's going to look like it was run through a Cuisinart here in a second.
Well, Doc's got the brakes locked up, and he's going to keep it off the fence, but the front end is sure going to need some help.
Bundy, even before it quit rolling backwards, was already trying to get it into low gear to get back into this thing. Now, he didn't know, I'm sure, what kind of body damage had been done. And here we see, as you said earlier, jettisons, the fenders in the hood.
You wonder if he pressed the button to do that. I'm afraid it just kind of all blew off into somebody else's lap. But Bundy has got problems, and here he is in the pits now. They're trying to fit a new fiberglass nose piece on there, but apparently some of the mounting brackets were torn loose in the spin, and they're just going to send Doc out without a nose, Steve Evans.
Well, as much as Preston Hen loves watching his Porsches roar around Daytona, you know they're not going to park that car. If it'll move, it'll race.
And here's our leaderboard. Ted Field, Danny Ongais out front of Fitzpatrick and Wallach in the Porsche. Bell Lanier in third, and Doc Bundy and Preston Hen and Al Holbert dropped to fourth after that spin.
Even though Ongais is driving the lead car, the 00 T600 Lola, got to give Ted Field a lot of credit too, Brock, for doing such a smooth, consistent job the first half of the race, allowing Danny to take this machine and lead again after he went out in the 0 car with some problems. Hawaiian-born Danny Ongais.
But the hero of the team, in my opinion, is Ted Field, who started the car way back in 15th place, Steve, moved it up steadily all afternoon, and finally had it in the lead when Danny Ongais took it over. Let's not forget another thing. This is the third car of the Interscope team. Ted hit the wall with one in practice. Danny broke the car, or the engine, or the suspension broke with a tire failure on the turbocharged car while in the lead. So this is the last car of the Glock.
And thanks to this red Pontiac Trans Am rental racer, it looks like John Paul Sr. is going to clinch the Endurance Championship, and that's worth a whole lot of money to him.
Well, he's also moved the car up a couple of spots since he took it over from Chip Meade. So while it's not a Porsche that he's normally accustomed to driving, John Paul Sr. seems to be more than comfortable at the wheel of that big old American car.
But Danny Ongais continues to lead as we get down to the closing laps of this 3-hour endurance race. And you think, as you were mentioning, what this team has gone through, Brock, this car never even came out of the transporter until late in qualifying. They really did not intend to run it at all, but it has performed beautifully for them.
Well, it's just done a wonderful job, and I've got to say, it has to be one of the most beautiful racing cars I've ever seen. What a marvelously streamlined automobile with that kind of ominous black paint job that all of Ted Field's Interscope cars carry. By the way, Interscope doesn't mean anything at all. It's a lot of people think it's the name of a company. It's just a name that Ted thought up to put on the side of his racing cars. Everybody else had a company that kind of sponsored it, and of course Ted underwrites his own racing effort, and so he just kind of came up with the name Interscope. Sounded sort of technical and kind of racy, and perfectly satisfactory for his needs.
Danny Ongais invited me to visit their shop in Newport Beach, California, where they maintain these race cars, and I'll tell you, that facility is as beautiful as these race cars.
Well, they've done some wonderful racing efforts out of that shop, and of course Indianapolis is also on their schedule. We remember that Danny had a terrible crash in the 1981 Indianapolis 500, and a lot of people said he would never race again. Very seriously injured one of his legs. He still walks with a rather pronounced limp from that accident. Danny's had a couple of very bad crashes, and a lot of people felt that he would really never regain his form after that Indy crash. But based on the way he's driving today and the way we've seen him drive in recent seasons, he's got it all back and then some.
You know, we talked earlier about Danny Ongais' formula being a national championship drag racer. He actually learned to road race at a drag strip. Old Irwindale Raceway out in California. He'd come out during the week with an old beat-up Chevrolet-powered Formula A car and use the turnoffs of the drag strip and race around and around and around. And that's really where he started doing this kind of competition.
Yeah, he just about raced. I think he raced motorcycles, then he raced and he raced dragsters, and shown real skill. The man is just stony in terms of his personal bravery. He's just about as brave as they come.
For Bob Wallach, running back in second place here, his only real hope now, Brock, is that Ongais breaks something.
Well, absolutely, and I think he may secretly feel that's going to happen because, as you know, the Porsches have this reputation for reliability, and they're almost invincible in endurance racing of this nature, whereas the Lola Chevrolet has a rather erratic reliability record. They're very fast in short sprint races, but they don't seem to hold together too well in long races of this nature. In fact, the only car that ever won here of this type was a Lola Chevrolet that Mark Donohue drove back in the early 1970s, and that won a 24-hour race here at Daytona Beach, and everybody was surprised. But of course, we know the kind of engines and reliability that Roger Penske and Mark Donohue built into those cars, and there may be some lessons that have been learned from their experiences, because this car, with its Chevrolet old American-powered V8 stock block engine, is apparently just flat bulletproof this afternoon.
Well, Ongais also has the reputation for never, and I mean never, taking it easy. He is not going to pace himself. He's not going to say, I've got a big lead over Wallach and back off at all. That's just not his style.
Absolutely right. So, and he's been criticized for that kind of aggressiveness in endurance racing, where you're supposed to really drive cars with not in the kind of sprint car style that he's used to, where you nurse the car, you drive it at what we call 8/10 of 10/10, you know, a certain percentage under absolutely flat out to keep the car together. But Danny, as you said earlier, they call him on the gas, and it just couldn't be more appropriate for him, because he does like to run fast.
And one thing you can make book on is that this guy in the blue car, the Porsche, is not going to give up. He's back in second place and charging just as hard as he can.
He just doesn't have the speed right now of that Lola Chevrolet, which is, again, surprising. But that old 00 is just strong, and not probably quite as fast as the turbocharged car that went out a little earlier, but boy, plenty fast enough to hold off Wallach and the rest of the field. So that's really all Gaius needs at this point.
You know, I'm not sure anybody, with maybe the exception of Ted Field, can say they really know Danny and Gaius. I've been acquainted with him since the first day he came to the mainland from his native Hawaii, and I certainly couldn't say I know him. He is such a private person. They're not even really sure, I don't think, how old he is or what his home address is.
Yeah, he and Ted Field are two of a kind in a way. They're in a sport that is full of extroverts and show-offs and people that love to posture in the public eye. Both these guys are very, very private individuals. They keep to themselves. They're reluctant to give interviews. They just come out and do their job on the racetrack, and I kind of admire them for that. They don't come here to do anything except race cars, and they aren't trying to show off, and they aren't trying to impress you with anything else other than their skill behind the wheel. And that, I think, is not only an admirable trait, but a unique trait in this business.
And this is the last lap of the IMSA Grand Finale, with Danny and Gaius in the 00 car leading it over Bob Wallach.
Well, he could practically coast home from here, Steve. He's up on the banking between turns 3 and 4 at about 200 miles an hour, only about another quarter of a mile to go, so he could probably shut the engine off and make it home from here as he comes down toward the dog leg, toward the finish line. Checkered flag is out. There it is, the checkered flag. The winner, Danny Gaius, Ted Field, marvelous, come-from-behind victory, a surprising victory, a great victory. We'll be back with a winner's interview after this.
It's a grand finale. Brock Yates is in the pit area with the victorious team right now.
Ted, congratulations. Good race. Thank you very much. The crew was spectacular. The engine builder, Ryan Falconer, is our greatest asset, and Danny Gaius is unbelievable.
Marvelous work. Did you have any tense moments near the end?
Yeah, we always do. But really, the car ran flawlessly all day. There were no problems at all with it. I had a very tense moment early on in my shift when a car blew its tire in front of me. But everything was with us today, and we had the luck it takes to win.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Terrific work.
A very satisfied Ted Field, and well, he should be. As far as the IMSA GT Endurance title is concerned, well, John Paul Sr. wins it over ML Spear, but only by renting the Pontiac Trans Am you're looking at right here. As far as the Porsche Cup standings are concerned, Frenchman Bob Wallach takes it over John Paul Jr., John Paul trying to become the first American to win the Porsche Cup. He failed to do so. And that about wraps up a great...